Hi folks, we're going to be looking at Luke 18 and 19 today. So let's dive in. Jesus begins with another couple of parables. The first is the parable of the persistent widow, and we're told right up front the intention of this parable, that it's to teach about the importance of praying and not giving up. And Jesus uses an interesting illustration, that of an unjust judge, and how even that one will provide justice. So if we look at that case, how much more will God, who's all about justice, provide justice in a response to the prayers of his children? Then there's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Here Jesus is contrasting the actions that are just done for show, that may not indicate the status of one's heart, with one who earnestly goes before God in prayer, even if they are a lowly tax collector, one thought to be a sinner. There's the story of the little children coming to Jesus. The disciples are trying to shoo them away, but Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me, for to such belongs the kingdom of God." So here's an encouragement for us to think about, what is it that these children have that we should emulate? Is there a trust and a dependency that Jesus is lifting up that we should take as an example to us? He tells a story of the kingdom of God in response to a question by a ruler. A ruler comes to him and says, "Good teacher," and Jesus challenges him using that description for himself. One would not say that of a rabbi, one would only say that of God. So perhaps there's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek nature of Jesus' response, because of course we do know he is the Son of God. Then Jesus lists out all the commandments, which this ruler says that he has kept. Then Jesus says this, "You lack one thing." And he tells him to sell all his goods to the poor and then to follow Jesus. And of course he goes away sad about that, and his disciples are aghast. Well, who can get into the kingdom of heaven then? And he says, what is impossible with man is possible with God. And his encouragement to think about here is that it is not about wealth. It's about, what is that one thing that we hold most precious? And are we willing to give that up to be a disciple of Christ? In this chapter 18, we find Jesus predicting his death a third time. There are 3 different times that he lays out for the disciples exactly what is coming for him. And of course, the disciples continue to not understand. There's a blind beggar who receives sight, and I love this in this story. Jesus asks him, "What do you want me to do for you?" So Jesus makes him articulate his need before him. "Jesus, I want to see. Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you." And immediately he does receive his sight. As we move into chapter 19, we have the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and Jesus choosing to go home and to eat with him, and people again saying, "Why is he eating with sinners?" And of course, Jesus has already responded to this, that these are the very individuals that Jesus has come to seek and to save. We have the parable of the 10 minas, a slightly different version of what we might be more familiar with, the parable of the talents. And here again, though, Jesus is telling about a king who leaves his possessions and goes away for a time, and he entrusts them with people to be faithful with them. And so there's the 10, and the one who's given 10, and he earns more. And he's told, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And the same thing with the second man. But there's the final servant who says, "I didn't do anything with it because you're a hard man." And of course, the judgment is severe for him. The encouragement is indeed that we're faithful with what we've been given, and how important that is, our response to this one who has come before us. The chapter ends with Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, which we just went through on Palm Sunday, as he comes to Jerusalem as king. As we know, the people are quoting Psalm 118. We move on from that story to Jesus looking out over Jerusalem, the city he's just ridden in as king, and weeping for it. mourning for it, because he knows that not only will people reject him then, but he foresees the overthrow of Jerusalem, which happens in 70 AD. The chapter concludes with Jesus at the temple, where he indeed does drive out those money changers, because he is concerned that they are preventing people from coming and worshiping God. You have made my house, which was to be a house of prayer, into a den of robbers. And that's a little insight into Luke chapters 18 and 19.